Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's going to be a wild ride.
Right, I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be Moses, who is obviously a broadcast talent and former professional player. And actually, I'll tell you where we'll start. You are one of the few people who is in this small circle I have, where I've either known them too long, or I've done too many podcasts, and it always in my brain makes me think both. I must have already done a Reflections interview with them, because I think I've heard every story. And what I realised is we've never done one pro. In fact, I think actually the last interview I did with you might have been in CS 1.6 at like that CPL 20 plus years ago, because we've just done podcasts. We've obviously talked.
That's right.
I don't think I've ever done one with you, mate. I think this is the first one. I
thought we did, but you did one with my brother. Maybe that's what I was thinking of. I thought we did a Reflections in early CSGO, but you did it with my brother.
Yes. Which is, by the way,
fuck, dude.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it has been, I mean, we've known each other since when, 2002?
Something like that, yeah. Basically, as soon as you
it's been like 23 years. Yeah. I remember we still have articles on ESEA. There's still an article on the ESEA from a CPL where I wrote a fucking blog post from your hotel room on your laptop.
Yes,
it's a fucking wild ride going down in those trenches of the old school content.
Because actually, that's obviously where I'm going to start. First of all, I will actually reference that. If you haven't seen it, there's an interview with Moses' older brother. That's actually where I wanted to start, Moses, because with you, an obvious starting point is your brother. Because if people don't know, he's not only your older brother, but not by much, like a couple of years, but he's also, he actually was in the professionals part of the space before you. Like, he was the guy getting, I've told this story on his Reflections. He actually had a weird story where, bizarrely, because he was just trying to hop to the top level, he was actually initially on teams with like a bunch of like West Coast Asian players who were like fucking Gamers X and stuff. He's like, what? Because he looks like the fucking Thor thumb of there. But later on, he came back and basically had like a lower level invite team, which eventually was the team that was playing with you. And he actually told the story in his Reflections that he wanted to specifically play with you. So were you always gaming together before that? Was he any way like directly part of your entry in esports? Were you already getting good and he wanted to play with you? What was the story in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, he was there from the start of like getting into Counter-Strike at the beginning. Just one of his friends was playing it and came home one day and we put it in our PC and played it for hours. And that's kind of how it started. And I mean, we went from sharing a PC on a 56K line playing in pubs to then getting cable internet to then saving up money. We each built our own computers. We played in our own bedrooms next to each other in the public servers in Mirage and Mansion and just, shout information like he's going to open the door, start fucking shooting and just destroying pubs in that fashion. Made a team with another buddy of ours from high school that was just for fun and to play in some standard fun leagues, playing on playing on Italy was a map that you could compete in back then. So we played some matches on Italy, which is a wild experience. And then, eventually we just started to get into the competitive side, and that's where we kind of split off because he was 2 years older. So he started out better and got onto teams and got involved in the competitive circuit in leagues a lot earlier than I did. And then eventually I got onto a team, made it up to like Cal Maine at the time. And that was kind of when he'd been in GX, he'd been in Eminence, he'd been in a bunch of the invite teams, he'd been to a couple CPLs, he traveled to New York for a few events. And that's when he got to a point where he was like, all right, it was towards the end of, he was like a senior in high school. And he was like, all right, I'm going to step back. Instead of pursuing this shit, I'm going to step back and join this team with my brother. And we're going to start our own team. Because I think he'd started getting to the point where he wanted to be an IGL. I think he started getting to the point where he wanted to control his own team and be in charge of everything. And he was someone who... He was a junior Olympic champion in Taekwondo. He was like a state champion. I don't think he was ever actually state champion, but contender for state champion in wrestling. He was very, very good at competitive everything and in terms of like setting goals to achieve them. He was very good at that at a young age because he'd been doing Taekwondo his whole life. So he wanted to start a team where he had control and he could kind of set the discipline and he could set the practice and he'd done all the research and he was like, I just need a bunch of fucking monkeys who are going to come in and just listen to what I have to say and do everything that I want and listen to my kind of thing. So joined my team and we just slowly over a year swapped players out as we went along and built a team that we think could be a contender.
By the way, when you say all that, was your dynamic? I get a sense I can guess, but I'll ask anyway. Was your dynamic one where you actually did look up to him because he did these things? Were you more of like trying to prove yourself against your brother? Where were you at on that spectrum?
Probably prove myself against my brother, but I was like sort of the player who was really good and really talented, but not like and very good at like kind of like the individual side of the game, not so much in tune with like the macro team-based side of the game. you don't think about it as much these days with Counter-Strike. It's always kind of hard sometimes to look back on those old times, but the game wasn't even thought of on like a team scale, really at like very, very basic levels, if anything. It was kind of like, we play here and we can kind of cover the same position if they come here, but there was no concepts of reactions of protocols. So a lot of it mostly that between me and him.
By the way, when you say that, I know what you mean, because I've actually had fans, not even trolling, be like, what role was this player playing in 2003? I was like, one, I can't remember from a demo, and two, he wouldn't know. We didn't have the roles back then. Like, I'd have to literally watch
we had Opper, IGL, and then you had Riflers.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, I remember buying like the fucking Team 3D or X3 fucking counter like PC mag that came out. They had an article on like Dust 2 strategies, and they were the second best team in the world, the number one team in North America at the time, and their extent of their tactics was on Dust 2, play one at the B bomb site and one in CT spawn so that you can have a crossfire on mid. Right. And that was the extent of it. Okay. Like that was how deep things kind of went back then. It was probably deeper in the way we thought about it and approached things, but not so much deeper in ways.
It wasn't formalized. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, my brother was the one who was looking over and kind of like was looking at this Counter-Strike competitive thing and seeing it as something that he could become the best in. I was seeing it as a game we could play in and also be really good at the same time. And he was kind of like, this is like a skill set that I can dominate. So he had like a different mental edge and angle to it. And he was kind of the one who was like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch every single demo of every single top European player. I'm going to take notes like I don't do in school, and I'm going to download and figure out how European teams play and what like the fundamental good Counter-Strike to be played. And I'm going to bring that over to the North American side. And we're just going to play like Europeans in this North American team. And I think he was one of the first IGLs in the States. Moto was doing that a little bit at the time with 3D. But those two guys were really the ones who saw the level that the Europeans were at and wanted to kind of bring it in. So he was basically like the drill sergeant. I was the guy who would show up to practice ready to play, have a good time, frag, make some jokes, have a laugh. And he was more so all business. So it was kind of, we always had a friction of him, and it obviously wasn't much of friction because he was actually a junior Olympic Taekwondo champion, of where he would be trying to get me to buckle down and take things seriously, and I'd be fucking around with the boys behind his back, except we were practicing in the same room so he could see everything and would just end up kicking my ass later.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, he did actually say in his reflections. The funny thing is, though, he made it sound simultaneously like magnanimous that he played with you, but also like you're saying, like he knew that it was like the way to get better at the game. Because he said he wanted to make he goes, I wanted to make a team with my brother, which sounds like, oh, what an awesome brother. And then he goes, because then he can just sit next to each other on the same PCs and basically goes to like, and it's like, well, that also sounds like you want to like basically you've got your own like teammate in the room there. Like, yeah, a little bit self-serving, but I know what you mean, because what you're describing here, Moses, I think is also worth pointing out, which is, I don't think people get this, Moses. To this day, I would say it's only the last literally maybe 5 or 6 years that even modern in-game leaders actually approach the game the way you're talking about. I would say if you went even to the late 2010s, a lot of them were still, you watch 2 demos before you go to bed because you're playing that team 10 the next day. It was like quite old school for a long time. And if people don't know, in the era you're talking about, 20 plus years ago, the majority of IGLs just like had the basic playbook and called it in the game. Or in fact, in NA, famously, people would do that classic, we just get picks, bro. Like they wouldn't even do it. It was like basically it was like freestyle CS or default CS, people would say now. So actually, your brother did stand out in that sense, mate. I remember when I heard some of the stories from teammates of his fRoD and Trip and stuff, I would be like, bro, it makes sense now that you told me like the sporting side, because you're right, he did have like the discipline that people get when they do like proper professional sport. I mean, if people don't know, wrestling is notorious. Like it's a fucking insane grind, isn't it? You always have to get practice. It's like all about just like that's actually that's very rare, and especially as you say, to apply it not just like how much you play, but the idea he's like scouting all the demos and the playbooks and stuff. Yeah. This is pretty rare stuff on the ground back then. That kind of is an edge.
Yeah, I mean, and especially when you consider the demos back then, like there was no YouTube, there was no like, there was no great place to find demos. The demos back then, there wasn't even really a demo viewer, there wasn't a UI or anything inside the game. If you wanted to watch a demo, you sat down and you watched round 1 to round 24. We were in MR12 at the time, but the rounds were also like I think 2.5 to 3 minutes long at that point as well. There's no fast forward, there's no rewind, there's nothing. So I mean, you just have to sit through the demo. And he also did the crazy thing, which was extremely unusual at the time. I would imagine even for the European side of things, although I bet the top teams were involved with it a little bit more, where he was making us do practices where all 5 of us would just sit and watch the demo together, like 1, 2, 3, start the demo. Okay.
I bet that's not easy. I mean, if I think of some of the teammates you had, I bet it's tough to make them sit down and do that. It's not fun. You're not playing the game. Yeah.
And you really, I mean, you have tons of pushback. All the guys bitching about not actually playing, about having to sit there and be fucking bored and watch this demo and do this kind of stupid thing that they don't see is going to have the value. I think that's part of the reason why he kind of made this, magnanimous decision to step down too, is I think eventually he realized with the teams that he was joining of the experienced professional players at the time or at the top of the field at the time, you have guys who aren't going to change their ways for anyone, right? Like they're already kind of set. They're in one of the top 3 teams. I think he saw the value in dropping down and finding a crop of like 2 or 3 guys with talent and finding that along the path and building this system into them within this team so that no one was going to sit there and be like, fuck this shit. Everyone's going to be used to how the team operates and runs in this way. And it's like anything else. I mean, you join the team and you get into it and you start doing these things and guys bitch. And eventually you get to a point where you're like, all right, well, you're not taking it seriously enough. So we're going to find someone new who's not going to bitch every time we step in and watch this demo. The method of doing it was pretty fucking hardcore for the time in terms of like, we cut and turned down a lot of really talented, skilled players who weren't going to be, who didn't want to be involved in that kind of stuff.
By the way, that itself is also rare, Moses. You know what it was like back then? Back then, because we didn't have the roles, people used to just put the 5 best players they could together and then figure it out afterwards. That's even kind of like almost like a sporting approach right there. You're trying to get the specific type of person for you.
I mean, our 5th at that CPL that we did get at the Slick he wasn't even on our radar. He wasn't even on our list of players to have in that team, but everyone else said no once we kind of were like, you have to buy into this practice philosophy. And it was like, okay, well, he's not useless, sure. It's not to be addicted to, shout out to Slick if you're listening. But it was kind of like, it was sort of like, okay, this guy's, good, not great, but he's going to buy into what we want to do. And that's more valuable to us than the play.
By the way, a couple of things along those lines. If to really expand for people how hardcore your brother was going, one, I remember, I think it was you told me this story back in the day, that like, this was like his fucking hobby for real, like as in not just playing CS, it was like trying to be like a top pro and trying to beat the 3Ds in the world. You told me some mad story, like he'd be telling you like, we've got like a Cal invite game tonight at 10, we've got to like fucking study for the game, like doing homework for the fucking an online match that has no prize money.
He'd be sitting in his class in high school, like doing notes on how we're going to play that night. And he'd pass them to me in between classes. And I'd be like, okay.
I love it.
He'd be like 3rd or 4th hour, like, tell me what you think, Like,
so was it some shit like fucking X's and O's on like a napkin or something, like American football? Like.
It'd be like a write down, like fRoD's going to do this, Trip is going to do this, Moses is going to do this. This is the utility you have. You're going to set him up like this, and this is how we progress across the map. But I mean, the thing was, like, he was taking it to such a crazy degree. But at the time too, I remember when I said that the rounds were 3 minutes long, so we could beat 99% of the North American teams. I think we went undefeated in our first season together because we just played patient.
Right.
We were a team who came into every server, and like the thing would be like, hey, the round's 3 minutes long. Don't do a single fucking thing for a minute and a half. Like literally, like just get to a position and watch for a push for a minute and a half. And most of the people in North America were so impatient and ADD, sounds familiar, that they couldn't sit still for a minute and a half. And it was a very boring way to play, and it was very lame. And obviously, thank God we changed away from the 3-minute timing. But those were the things. Those are the, like, you notice that like weakness of like, okay, look, we're playing these teams who can't sit still, so let's just wait. Let's just see. They're going to give us a kill. Why work hard? Why put ourselves at risk? So those kinds of things that are like kind of boring Counter-Strike, but gave us such a huge advantage in the region. And I mean, once we got our four core players together before finding our 5th, we shot up the standings in North America. But I mean, yeah, he's one of those, my brother's one of those people who finds something and obsesses over it to such a crazy degree until it's accomplished. Like, this is a guy who ran a marathon while smoking cigarettes, just like woke up one day and decided he wanted to run a marathon, and was running like he was smoking like a pack every 2 days, ran a marathon. The first thing he asked for when he got done was a cigarette from my mom, like just to celebrate,
He should have been sponsored by Marlboro's, man. Oh, like ridiculous.
Yeah, he's like a 2-time junior Olympic Taekwondo championship. He was like one of the guys competing for a state championship trophy in wrestling. He's trained for triathlons. He's trained for Ironmans. He's just always had that element to him. And yeah, he geared it towards Counter-Strike, and he found ways. He did that fucking Michael Jordan thing where like you find ways to make it personal.
Right.
Like he built up to me and him like this rivalry with Moto and Team 3D, which we definitely felt. I doubt those guys felt it in any real sense, but I know like he had like some like real dislike of Moto, not personally, but just as like an entity within Counter-Strike. And I remember like there was always this quote. Remember when ESEA has a website, every time you'd load it, it'd have like a new quote at the bottom left. There was always one from my brother that would pop up that was like, in-game leader versus in-game leader is like a game of chess, and right now the score is 1 Hare, Moto 0. Like he was always keeping track of where he was stacking up against the best team in the region, and he was always hitting that really, really hard.
By the way, another thing as well that I remember you telling me, because it's just stood out because it's so funny, is you also said, and this is how I know that this guy was next level, you also said he would like review the games you'd played in. Again, this is some shit, by the way, that we didn't even have in CSGO until like coaches came along with. Like even IGLs didn't often like review with the team. You said he'd review demos and you'd like walk past his room or something and he'd just be making notes and be like going, fucking fRoD or something like that. He'd just, like he's already done, someone had pushed in the game or taken an angle. Was he really like that? Like a coach mentality or something?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I mean, he would definitely go back and review. He would definitely go back and, I mean, he would make notes during practice. Like, you know, you wouldn't really review your practice at all, but I mean, he would make notes while it was going on if he was dead or if he noticed something or someone fucked something up. And for me, I probably got the brunt of it because I was right fucking there the whole time. But yeah, I mean, he always had some critique, and it was usually philosophical. Like, it wasn't always like, you know, I think he stayed away from sort of individual decision making, but it was more about like how the pace, not being patient enough, not waiting long enough, you know, not coordinating, not setting up a proper post plant. You know, the concepts that are so well drilled in the fundamentals today were just kind of getting started at this point in terms of, you know, I would say things like in terms of what I call like juggling aggression. Like if you have the attention of someone, like you don't have to commit to this fight. You have a teammate close by, like let him peek. Like you don't have to be the one with the glory, with the frag, like make sure the peek is there. I think at this time too, it was right after Europeans had actually this happened to us when we were competing at a CPL, but we had just kind of learned the ways that Europeans had gotten good at exploiting the economy system at the time, which was an aspect to the game that North Americans didn't really think about. So that was like an area we started adding into, and just things like that, and things like comms. Comms was a big one, like getting players used to the level of comms and the kinds of comms and the efficiency of comms you have to play. So it was things like that players normally didn't think about. Not so much decisions in the game, which is also why I think there was a lot of pushback from some of the more established players, because it was like, we're not even talking about the game. You're talking about how I'm talking. You're talking to me about like my attitude, and like those were kind of areas where he had a lot of focus on in terms of having the practice mindset of making sure we're not goofing around, making sure we're taking it seriously so that these things are sticking. These were sort of areas where within our team, he made a huge step up from things that weren't there at all to then having some level of authority with those topics.
Because I set all that up because I feel like if people don't know that aspect, they won't really know the Moses story. Because to me, you are like, even though you would definitely have similarities, like by the way, when you both had hair, you look quite similar in some ways. Yeah. I do, although what's mad is if people don't know, the really bizarre thing for me, Moses, was years later. That's why he went fucking bald as well. That's just too weird now. So I knew you both 20 years ago. Anyway, whatever. Listen, you both look good with the shave cut. It's all good. But the point is, I actually do think there is an obvious contrast here. I mean, as you say, I can imagine he must have been your fucking parents' fucking golden boy. He's doing everything right. He's hitting all the marks, Moses. This is the dream. It's like you're on the team. You're at the state championship. You do. By the way, even when you play the game, you're serious about it. You're like, did that make you, in comparison, like you said, you were like the talented one who just fucked around a bit. If people don't know later in the story, Moses just fucks off to have a girlfriend or whatever. Like, were you more of just like the second kid who was just a rascal or something? What were you like in contrast?
I was sort of like, he was more of like the competitor. I don't know how to phrase it. Like he was the more competitor, athletic, like really, really driven. He had that discipline side of him that I didn't have when I was younger. He did Taekwondo from a very young age. I stopped doing Taekwondo a little bit into it. I was never into individual sports, so I was more of a team sports kind of guy. I was athletic as well, but again, team sports side of things. But he was more of a guy who, our differences were more like he always felt like more of like the brawn activity, energetic, and I liked reading. I was more into books when I was younger. I was the good student where he was the
Right.
student that was struggling. So like we kind of had that sort of dividing line to us. But when it came to the game, I think he's like I said, he saw it as something he could dominate and as like a discipline he could excel at and get better at. And I saw it as a fun kind of hobby at the time. Like it was something I was enjoying doing, especially once we got good enough to start traveling to events. I loved like going on the road trips, and it was something I was doing and having fun doing with my brother more than trying to get to the top, which I think kind of like in my early playing career really showed. I was kind of content being my goal was set. I wanted to be the best team in North America. His goal was set. I want to be on the best team in the world, which would be probably a good way to define the distinction between our two kind of mindsets around Counter-Strike at that time.
Right. By the way, since you say you were like the individual talent, etc., this is one thing I want to actually bring up with you, Moses. I actually think people don't realise you're being too charitable to some of the other people who work as talent. Because I always used to say, like, my flex, Moses, I had a clever way to phrase it the opposite way. My flex, because obviously the one thing people could say about me is like, well, you weren't a pro. I used to say the other way. I used to go, no, it's the other way around, mate. Everyone else as a pro did my job, like analyst or commentator, pretty much. Mainly analyst, by the way. I'm actually the one person, until people like Maui came along, who kind of got to do it, who wasn't ever a pro in any context. Right? Of all the people who do that, I once did do a video on this topic. The real problem is everyone except like maybe Maniac, and even then that's still quite a while ago in CSGO now. Almost every other person pretty much who's talent. They're just too long when they were a player for the modern fan to have seen them play. So everyone just goes, oh, you're a player. But what they do as a result, Moses, is if you don't talk yourself up, they're just going to think you were like an also-ran player. You were just an okay player. And what I always try to tell people is there are certain people, like the only one I'm aware who does this is actually Pimp. He's the only one who actually has sort of like, he fights his own corner. I always tell people, and I know Lurpus doesn't really do analyst work, but he did once upon a time for a number of years. You and Lurpus are some of the only ones I think can actually just turn to the others and go, if we're talking about being a player, you were just a player. I was actually like, in the case of Lurpus, he was like the IGL of a team that's like beating like Forest on lad and stuff, mate. Like in your case, you were actually like one of the better players in NA. Like you were actually like a skilled, you weren't like the fucking support player, even though that wasn't really a role, but you weren't like the worst player on the team. You were like one of the best players on your team, right? In your actual pomp, I know it was only a few years, but like you were actually you were like a 16-year-old phenom in a way, right?
Yeah, I was. I mean, my first CPL I went when I was at the age of 15, and I had to get a fake ID for it. I had to phone in for a fake ID because you had to be 16. We sent money in a picture.
By the way,
what
I love about that is all the other ones were so naive. They were like, no, I'm only 15, so I can't play. Moses is like, there's a way around this. I like that.
I gotta follow the rules. Yeah. Well, we sent off for it. We sent like $250 cash and like a passport picture to like a random address.
Were you so scared it was just never going to come back and they just keep it 250?
It never came back. It never fucking came back. So, like you said, my brother and I look alike. So we just did a pass back with our IDs to get into the tournament area.
Oh, okay. I bet you felt like it was like Ocean's 11 or something when you got away with that. I bet the euphoria when you got away with it. I'll bet, yeah.
Oh, I was so nervous.
I can't even imagine going all the way to the tournament, and if they catch you, you just fucked, you can't play. Oh, that must be a rush, though.
It was the tournament too where I think Volcano wasn't allowed to play because he was too young.
Yeah,
I believe, if I remember correctly as well. Because his was somehow got public. I don't know how, but he fucked up there. But where were? I was one of the better players. I was really strong and really good at the time. I was probably one of the better players in North America at the time. The only reason I don't ever pump it up on a desk these days is because like, what am I gonna do? Be like, well, you bitches just weren't around in 2003. Sure. It's like 2003 North American Counter-Strike, and I mean, we have a scene that's so focused on the European side of things that all the people who have been around over the years, there's not really any North American old guard that are still around in Counter-Strike. There's like me and Craig.
No, that's probably it.
You know anyone else?
Vaguely Rambo, I guess.
Rambo, yeah.
Intermittently, yeah. Bears a tiny bit.
And not really involved in the tournaments the way the old school European guard is involved with products, involved with hiring on the back end. So like you have like a whole slew of like production staff who watched Henry G play in CGS, so it's kind of harder for me to throw back. But I mean, if I allow myself to toot my own horn, I was one of the better players at the time. I was a really strong rifler. particular, I could play a lot of different roles because we didn't have roles in the same way that we do now. Your role on a map was more predicated onto like which fights you felt comfortable on, and some people felt more comfortable entry fragging on Train than they did on Aztec. So they played an entry fragger role on a specific map. For me, I think I was always I think one of the smarter players. I think I had that angle of patience to my game that my brother brought in that most other players at the time didn't have. So I was really good in clutches. I was good at mid rounds and maneuvering and using information to kind of find a tricky positioning or tricky just where I play on the map. So I had a lot of good skill set, sharp aim that I never had as much confidence as I probably should have had. I was the secondary opper as well. So I was a pretty well-rounded player. I think my career was just short, probably compared to most of the top players at the time.
Here's what I want to do. Instead of just going purely chronological, I feel like because of this, how we've set up the story here, we should just do like basically almost like the overview now, and then we'll go on some of the events. So the overview, if people don't know, the reason I bring that up, Moses, is the actual reason you are not a more famous player. Like if I ask someone name like North American 1.6 players, they're going to get through a lot of names before they get to you. They're going to go through Moses, Rambo, and even fRoD, and there'll be a whole load. And the problem is your name's not going to come up very quickly because you don't have like the massive championship. But also, you basically played realistically like 2 years out of 3 or something. It wasn't very long. And if people don't know, you're one of the only people I've ever met who actually did have, even towards the latter period when we weren't players, but you still had teams like, look, come and play, or can you play this event? And you're one of the few people who chose not to. Like at the time, everyone was grinded just to try and make it. But if people don't know, like this might sound like a meme like now, but back then you did for real just get like a girlfriend basically. And at the time, you just decided to sort of like become less active in the game, right? It was just essentially like your own choice to step away.
Yeah, and I think it might have been I might have made a different choice if things hadn't kind of worked out as they did up to the point where I had to make the choice.
Oh, okay.
Not that I would have we got to remember there was a point where we were in this United 5 team that had done well. I had to skip a couple of events for school, and it was about at this time. Remember that TSG lineup did really good with CBZ, Dominator, Volcano. I can't remember who else was in that fucking team that way back when. But they had just kind of popped off and done really well. And we had sort of hit in a little bit of a rut after some successes. And it felt like at that point we were going to make some changes. And at the time, my brother got really obsessed with this idea because he had graduated high school. I think I was it was going into my senior year of high school. And they decided to merge the teams of United 5 and TSG. And they wanted to get the best of both sides and get a gaming house outside of Chicago. And all 5 teammates live in the gaming house together, practice, play the matches from a nearby LAN center that was going to sponsor them with free time and free PCs. And just when that kind of went down, it was sort of like he gave me the option to be a part of it remotely since I was still a senior in high school. And I told him I disagreed with the decision that he was making because I felt like it was cutting guys that had worked hard in our team out. Because fRoD was down in Florida. fRoD didn't want to do it. He was like, I'm not moving across the country on this like kind of pipe dream. I don't want to do it. So he was out. I was out. Slick wasn't going to be part of it. So it was Michael and Trip going from U5. And I think it was like CBZ, DeBears, and Dominator from TSG came in, which is a strong lineup at the time, to be fair. But yeah, that was one of those decisions. And then eventually what happened down the road, he eventually sold the U5 brand to the West Coast guys as he kind of quit Counter-Strike at this point, realizing it wasn't going to get him anywhere, and my parents weren't going to fund him to like try and pursue this dream. They would support him, but not with money. So he moved on to go try and be a firefighter. I can't remember exactly what he did after that. Sold the team to the West Coast guys, and I was kind of on that team as part of the sale, but the environment didn't vibe, personalities didn't vibe. I didn't really like the guys. They didn't really like me. So eventually that's when I was kind of like, you know what? I have this girlfriend. I'm graduating college. Fuck it, I'm done. I'm not gonna compete to this level with this team. I'd rather just enjoy the girlfriend, enjoy the last semester of high school, go off to college, and we'll see where the cards lie when I get there. So it was one of those things. I think at that time too, I'd also tried out for Team 3D at a point to play with like K Sharp and Moto. I think Volcano went over there at that point, and they kind of chose to go in a different direction because K Sharp was friends with CBZ and they lived in the same city, so he pulled CBZ in. And at that point I was just kind of like, all right, well, fuck it. Like, it's cool. It was a good run. Because again, at that time I didn't have the long-term dedication to believing that this could actually be something, or at the time it was so far away that I didn't think it was something that made sense for me to pursue.
This is also why, to people listening now in 2025, what Moses is describing is what everyone thought. Like, even some of the people in the top teams used to think, look, if I ever have a year where I drop off, I'm probably just done. Like, this isn't like a professional sport. Like, at the time, remember, this is one of the first esports games that even lasted like 10 years. Like, no one knew the game would keep. The idea, by the way, Counter-Strike would be going now was insane. Like, back then it was like, let's just essentially see next year if they announce a bunch of tournaments, then we keep going. Everyone was almost on a year-by-year basis, right? But to you, it was like you just didn't see like a longer. I mean, it was going to get in the way of your real future in a sense, right?
You also have like fucking 16, 17 years of American propaganda pumped into your brain that you have to go off to university. That's the next step. You know, graduate school, go to college, get a degree, pay off your loans, get a job, start a career, get in. You have that kind of thing. I think was really built up, and I think if at that point, if I had done more to kind of push the boundaries in life in that sense, I might have had a bit more courage to stick around with it, and maybe because the CGS came up not immediately, but pretty quickly after that. My brother had left for like a year and even decided to delay his firefighting paramedic thing to come back and try and make it into the CGS eventually. And I would have had that. I had opportunities and options from teams to kind of join a team and try and go to the combine and make it onto a squad. But it just, again, it was like that. The pipe dream was where Counter-Strike is now. Like that was the dream we kind of had and whispered. But at that point, it didn't feel like we were anywhere close to it. On top of everything, like you got to remember too, teams at this time, like in North America, there was one team that was drawing a salary in Team 3D, and I don't know what it was at the time, but it wasn't significant. It was maybe $1,500.
Yeah, it might have even been 1,000 something, but it wasn't much. No. And at the time, that was considered, as you're saying, it's not like they were on 1,000. Then it's like the league. You're on 800. You're on 0.
Yes.
You get all you get the prize money, and that's it. That's if they pay the prize money as well. By the way,
my salary was like a Steel Series hoodie for the event to wear. And I mean, even at that time, because we beat 3D at that CPL in 2003, and I think Craig saw a little bit of an opportunity and had the foresight to be like, on some level, the rising tide or the tide raises up, whatever the fucking saying is. He went out with Team 3D, who was our biggest rival, and they had NVIDIA and Intel as like headline sponsors for that org for like a year at that point. And he went out and kind of came to us as their competitors who had just beat them and knocked them out of the event early, and brought us in and say, NVIDIA wants to get another team on board, and we'd like it to be you guys. We think you guys have, blah, 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 all these good things. And I think also realizing how that side of things worked. I mean, the NVIDIA deal at the time was nothing. It was like, we thought it would be like, I don't know if we expected salaries, but we expected travel assistance to multiple events. And it was kind of like, for 6 months, we're going to give you guys $5,000. And then the next 6 months you'll get $5,000. And like, that was kind of how the deal was structured. And this isn't to be critical of the deal at all. At the time, it was amazing. And I'm sure it was an excellent investment. But for us, it was kind of like, okay, well, that $5,000 helps us get to like this one event next month. And then you also get to a point where you realize when you feel like this deal that's coming in from NVIDIA and signing on is this big, like, we made it moment. And you realize it's actually only getting you like one of 15 steps you need to take across this year. So, I mean, I don't know, as a 17, 18-year-old at the time, it just didn't seem like the decision that was best for me to make. And it also would have involved having massive battles with my parents, for weeks on end, which equally in my brain was like, it's not worth that kind of fucking, I wasn't there yet.
By the way, let's rewind a bit then, because one thing I do know about your past that is also quite cool is you aren't the guys where I always tell people the story. There was a weird myth among Europeans in Counter-Strike that all the Americans suck on LAN because there were certain players, I would say probably like 3/4 of the people who were in Cal Invite, did just come up on the internet. They played on the internet, super spread apart across the country. You just hope you get a good server. By the way, half the people are fucking cheating, even if they're LAN players. There's no prize money at the end. You just do it as something to compete between the lands, but it's also, to get your name out there, to get the seed up for the CPL. And when you go to the tournament, and the real problem would be, you'd get people, maybe this even applies to some of your later teammates, you'd get people where that might be the first, or the second LAN they ever played was like a CPL against like fucking Heaton or something. Whereas I always said, that's true in certain parts of the US, but there are certain parts, obviously the West Coast was very famous for this, where they have a thriving LAN scene. I mean, famously, they had all the LAN cafes, obviously, that's where the GX and all the rest of them were, and they were all playing there every week. And so those players, you notice, were all LAN proven. People might not know this. People like you and your brother were the ones where, aside even from CPLs and stuff, you guys were going to every local LAN, right? You were just like trying to get, and we're talking about the days when you're slobbing it. You know, you sleep in a sleeping bag, or everyone's in a truck, or you just pay the petrol. You guys were kind of almost, it was almost like being a band trying to come up or something, right?
We went, Michael and I went to every single LAN in the Midwest for like 4 or 5 years. We went to LANs that didn't even have like Counter-Strike tournaments. They'd be LANs that's like, this is being held in like this fucking random lodge on the highway, excuse me. And it's going to be 150 people. Just show up, bring your PCs, and we're just going to play in a big LAN center. But it wasn't like, hey, 150 people are going to have Counter-Strike. It was like you'd show up and maybe 15 people would have Counter-Strike, and everyone else is playing RuneScape, and everyone else is playing, you know, like there's no organization so you just wander around the LAN facility being like, who wants to play Counter-Strike? And they'd hop into a server and it'd be like four or five of us, and we'd be like hardcore trying. Like that was our CPL final. That was our major final.
I love it.
We'd be hardcore trying.
Some noob, like, yeah, I could play a bit of CS.
We're like, oh yeah, I guess I'll pause Age of Empires for this fucking like 15-year-old to play some CS, and we're just smoking them, like, you know. And it would be things, but like we'll go to every tournament. We drove to Chicago. We played in a Counter-Strike tournament in the back of a Circuit City in like the storage room, like 10 PCs set up for 6 teams, and you just have to rotate throughout the day. And it was, you know, like a 6-team single elimination bracket that took 14 fucking hours because no one knew anything at the time. But yeah, we grinded every single Midwest LAN. And I mean, that shit still doesn't always help you because, you know, the competition in the Midwest isn't, you know, isn't the same as competition at the West Coast, but it gives you some credit, but you still go to your first competitive LANs where nobody trusts you, nobody thinks you're good, and everyone, if you're known from your online play, it's only because they think you're cheating and you're there to prove yourself. Yes. So there's always some pressure on, right? Like whether it's self-inflicted or inflicted by the close-knit community around you. But yeah, I mean, we had a lot of players that would show up and struggle on LAN, but that's always been the currency in Counter-Strike, especially before there were big prize pools and trophies and events of notoriety. All you really had was how good you play on LAN. That was like the point of pride that you peddled in. That's what got you onto teams. Wasn't online play, it was LAN play. So we always tried to get out to every single LAN event we could. And when you start going to the LAN events, you just notice more and more how bullshit online Counter-Strike is. Sure. And not even for cheating purposes, but also especially in the States at the time, the internet was shit. So I mean, if I wanted to play on a West Coast server, I'd be playing with 90 ping. When we played in official matches, it'd be the first half on a West Coast server and the second half on an East Coast server, so that the West Coast team had to play under the same shitty conditions for half a Counter-Strike that you did. We played a Merc team online from Iceland. They would play with 140 pings in our leagues as well. So I mean, there was just shit, but you just realize when you get to LAN, it's always the fun is like, different angles work. Some angles work better. Some angles work where they didn't work online. You can do different things. Shots hit easier. You can double up kills a lot better. So constantly going to LAN was like a constant reminder of how you should be playing versus having all your habits formed versus in online Counter-Strike.
By the way, when you say that, though, the reason I bring up the story about going to the LANs as well is because a bit like that story you told now, which actually, like I say, it sounds like some other movie where you had to like pass the ID back and then go, I got away with it. Like, people might not realize this sounds like, you know, poverty. Everyone I know who did the little circuit you're talking about actually looks back really fondly, Moses, because in a way that itself is exciting, right? You get to, you hear about a LAN that's in 2 weeks, or there might be enough teams there with enough registrations. There's going to be like $300 for first place. Again, this is nothing now, but if you're like 16, mate, or 15, and you go and you get your $50 or something for winning, that feels like fucking hustling, bro. You feel like you're it's like rounders in poker. It's like, holy shit, I'm becoming pro. That's kind of a thrill back then, right?
Still make the joke to this day. Like back then, the difference of winning an event was eating at McDonald's versus Applebee's. Like you might get like $100 for winning, but if you got second place, you might get like $20. In which case, you're going to get a fucking cheeseburger at McDonald's. Otherwise, you're going to get the fucking the mozzarella sticks at Applebee's. There were plenty of those LANs where you'd go to, and if you just don't win them, you just end up losing, like, you know, across your team, like $600. I mean, those events we were traveling to, we would leave from our house in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We had a Honda Passport SUV. We would drive to like 2 hours south of Chicago to pick up a teammate of ours who would hop in. We would drive from there 1 hour south of Chicago and pick up our 2 next teammates. And we would end up with like 6 people in this car with like 2 people in the open trunk in the back, and just like hanging hanging out, listening to music, driving to events. And then you'd go stay. You could only afford one hotel room for all 6 people. So you guys would all sit in there. And it was just like a perfect little, it was just kind of like a road trip that you would be on from time to time. And like those are the fondest memories, just like in the back, listening to frag music, fucking Disturbed, fucking Linkin Park blasting when you're driving 3 hours to this tournament. Like it's fucking sick. You get to the venue, 6 other teams there. You're out hanging around at a LAN center all day doing nothing but just like eating junk food and fucking drinking pop. Like it was fucking great. Like those are times you look back on fondly now. And I think there's sometimes times to look back on in the sense of like a reminder of where we come. And also for me these days with how many big arena events we do, like, I know like this is a little bit of a tangent, but I know I went to like a Philadelphia, Chicago a year and a half ago. And it is kind of like transporting you back in time to the like of this is what esports has always kind of been, the more grassroots side.
Right.
Like we've gotten away from the grassroots side in the pursuit of the big spectacle, and it's fun to go back and experience the grassroots side of things again from time to time.
Oh, by the way, that's also as an aside. The other thing I always think about, this current story, as of right now, my age terribly, you're 2 years, who knows? As of right now in the VRS system, every person knows that you get extra points for the lands, right? So I have all these scenarios where it's like NIP is attending Fragville. You're like, what? But I always wonder about some of the modern pros, bro, who've never been to those lands, and they just only know like IEMs. I can't even imagine when they rock up at these random lands. Like, what the fuck is this? Like, it must be crazy.
I mean, to go down that route, I mean, I just did the Fisher 1 event a couple months back, and like that is like a huge prize pool, all the massive teams. It's not really grassroots. It's in a theater. It has the big stage and the lights and the big screen. But the operators of the event are a little bit inexperienced. The stage managers of directing people of where to go and hitting timings are very so. Like when I was casting back there behind the stage and I was watching the teams line up to do the walkouts, all the experienced players on the Astralis side, like Hooksy was looking around, like where are we supposed to? Like they didn't have anyone directing them, so it was kind of like a chuckle we all had of like, we've gone back in time a little bit. Like, the spectacle is there, but the organization around it isn't hitting the same marks.
As you say, when you first go to a CPL, etc., like the problem back then is there is no shortcut. You have to actually go to a big LAN, as you say, perform at that LAN. Otherwise, everyone's just going to go, you're an onliner or you cheat, right? Actually, you had a player in your team, I can tell you from knowing the other top players at the time, that people thought cheated. It was fraud. I know it sounds mad because the joke is like the Zemu thing. When fans go, some people used to think Zemu cheated. It's like, if you ever watched the demos, it looked like he did. He was too good. Like, that's what basically people did to fRoD back then. I can remember the 3D players and the other players in the top teams, what they all thought was like, either he's like just an onliner, if it was like, the mild corp, if you're not, or some of them just thought he straight up cheated because he was obviously really good. And at the time, there wasn't many players. Like, this is another thing that's different. Back then, people would more AWP, a bit like secondary AWPers do now. Sometimes they're not feeling it, they won't do it. fRoD used to be the guy who really did buy the AWP every fucking round. Like, he would do it every round if it was up to him. So I also think he was quite strict in that sense. But I want to know, what was it like in your sense? Because I know this is basically, for me, the first team he got, like, because he had his LAN results, he actually got some respect. And I think before that, I always got the sense maybe he could have been in a better team, but people just didn't like him for some reason, or they thought he cheated.
He was a massive cunt back then as a personality. I mean, I love Danny to death, but like at the time, this is what the image of him was. He was just a huge asshole. I think he had like some personality clashes. He's very cocky for how good he was. And I think that's what rubbed a lot of teams the wrong way. He was in that same tier as my brother and I when my brother stepped down to the team with me of playing in like Cal Main, Cal Premier, of trying to break into the invite, and he was kind of always on those teams, jumping around, playing for a South Florida team for a good amount of time. And just never making that break because the team couldn't get good enough, and nobody from the top wanted to go down and pluck him out of the team because they didn't want to play with him. But yeah, he was someone that when we needed an op, and he was kind of, I think, if I remember correctly, which I might not, he was one of the only people we really thought about in terms of the opping. And I think the conversation there was a couple things. It was one, he's an asshole, and apparently from what we've heard, we've never played with him, can be tough to work with. And my brother was pretty confident that he could handle that side of things because he had a lot of experience playing with or being around competitive people and around those egos and those attitudes. And then the second thing was about the cheating side of things was like, there are a lot of people accusing him of cheating, and like we haven't felt the same thing, but that is a kind of a concern. And obviously anytime you're building a team to go to a LAN, it's a concern. And we were just like, you know what? let's take the risk. Like, even if not that even if he's cheating, it's fine. It's more like, even if he's only 80% as good on LAN as he is online, like, we'll take this risk here and try and get the payoff and try and get the reward. So we brought him in, and honestly, like, I don't actually have any memories of Danny having some significant ego, yes, but like annoying asshole attitude,
okay.
no. Like, wasn't like difficult to work with, wasn't difficult to practice with. He was like me, liked to joke around and liked to have fun. But the ego was certainly there, and I think my brother probably did a really good job of tamping that down. I don't remember any specific details to it, but I think what really helped Danny more than anything is, I think, with all the research and the plans and the ideas my brother had of how he wanted to play, it gave Danny like a really clear indication of where he wanted his opping to have the most impact. And I think, I don't know, I wouldn't go so far as to say world, but I would say in North America, I think my brother was the first person to really design game plans around an opper not going for kills, but holding for kills. Right?
By the
like
way, this is something I even
angle.
remember. I remember it was something like, I think fRoD said it in an interview. He said something like that. What they convinced him was, whereas if you think about the op back then, it's just people peeking a million times and doing Kenny S shit. I remember back then he was saying, and this is how I know it has to be Hare. There's no way fRoD thought this up. I'm sorry. He was like, actually back then I learned the power of the op is you can just like control an entire side of the map. Like people can't cross this line. For example. That's like tactical. That's pretty advanced actually, bro, for 20 years ago. Yeah.
It was huge. Yeah. I mean, it would be things like, we're going to, this is old school train. We'll execute out Pop Dog and the riflers are jump. Danny, take this angle. And in the old train, you can peer past Z, past Con, all the way deep past the bomb train. There's no wall. You can go all the way deep towards the exit from CT spawn that the CTs come out of. So you could essentially cover off 2 choke points. So he was like, Danny, I just want you to fucking sit here. Like, this is all you do. The riflers are going to get out. We're going to start scaling. We're going to start pacing. We're going to start taking fights. I just want you to fucking sit here. I don't want you to look for a fight. Just wait for the defenders to come over from the B bomb site. Some idiot's going to jump out from CT spawn. I want you to hit that shot. Someone's going to come out of Z. I want you to hit that shot. That's your whole responsibility. And I think it took a while for Danny to really accept that, because the opper and a fragger especially wants to get into the action. But I think he eventually obviously learned it and really started to excel in it. That was one of the things that he's always been known for as an opper, was just he's going to hit that shot. He's going to hit that shot when someone comes into the crosshair. He's going to be able to hold it and just nail it. So that was one thing that we got really good at with him, was finding a way to almost layer the opper within the tactic in a way that teams weren't doing at the time. So that was one of his big kind of things with Danny. And I think it gave fRoD some purpose and a point to look at and a point to think about. And it obviously started helping when that very first season that we were a team, we went, I think, undefeated in the regular season, or maybe 1 loss in the regular season. But once, we always say winning solves everything. Well, winning solves those debates. If you're winning by doing these things that you've said you don't want to do, but actually it's impactful and it's working and you're getting the numbers and the team's winning and you're doing well, it's like, all right, fuck it. Like, there's no point in me fighting now,
By the way, was it actually weird, or I don't know, maybe it was fun, that obviously in the years later, especially in complexity, he genuinely became one of the absolute best players probably ever in CS 1.6. Like, he really was unbelievable. Even though, I know what you mean, because he was like a massive shit talker and very cocky back then. People never really wanted to give him his props. But I'll tell him, like, listen, mate, like, I might in fact favour Kogu, but it was between him and Kogu the best opera. Like, these guys were fucking Chris. Was it fun to see him become super good later, when he sort of stepped away?
Yeah, I mean, really fun, because I think all of us most of us still keep in touch. My brother, fRoD, Trip, and myself. Not anything crazy, but maybe like once a year, once every 2 years, we get a reminder, send each other a message or something like that. I've talked to Danny a couple of times over the years. So it was fun, and I was very happy for him, because we've all had like a brotherhood. So I've always wanted to watch those guys succeed. I'd say it's more fun watching him have some success in Valorant for me right now.
Oh, okay.
Than it was for me, because at the time it was a little bittersweet. I was off at college and I was having fun and I was doing my own thing and I was away from the game.
Right.
Yeah, but there was always, and there is always there has always been an element in the back of my head of like, how far could the career have gone? How far could I have taken it as a player? Not in any kind of crazy way, but it's always been there. So I mean, that was fun watching Danny. I congratulated him when I think they won that EWC as complexity, and Trip as well. I always really liked Trip. I should qualify as well, because you brought it up. I didn't notice anything when Danny was in my team, but Danny was a huge shit talker. Danny was probably the most prolific shit talker we had, but he was great to his team. But if you weren't on his team, he will go scorched earth and he will destroy everything. He's got some pretty infamous clips in North American Counter-Strike lore. But yeah, it was good celebrating all those guys having success too. Like Trip went on to have the same success in complexity, and then he went on to have all that success in online poker as well. So I've always kind of checked in with him and checked in with his poker, and I got to see him a few years back, maybe 5 or 6 years back at an event up in Canada. So yeah, it's fun getting to just kind of bump into him.
By the way, what was the scenario for you when you actually got to play in Cal Invite? Like, was there once? Did you used to get hyped for that? Was it actually exciting? Because, like you say, before you've gone to the LAN yet and you actually establish yourself as a top team, that is your CPL biscuit. It's your chance to play Team 3D or rival from the West Coast. It's like you can actually play the real teams, and even though it's online and no one counts it all that. Here's the thing: for bragging rights, it definitely counts. The people they definitely want to beat you if they're fucking playing you Team 3D or something. Yeah, mate.
There wasn't spectating the way there is now, but there was a lot more attention being paid to, like, I mean, we didn't have HLTV was around, but that was more European based. We had Domain of Game or Domain of Pain, I think at the time, or something like that. And then that would turn into Gotfrag, and that would turn into ESEA. So you had a big audience active on the forums, looking at the scorebot on IRC, looking at the results. So yeah, I got pumped. Like that was like, in America, we have this thing. I don't know if they do it in Europe. When you're playing like a fucking soccer match for your school, you wear like a suit and tie to school for like match day. So everyone at the school knows it's going to be a match day. We didn't do that shit for Counter-Strike, obviously, but my brother and I very much had like a different, I think we had a different attitude at school on match days because we were very focused throughout the day. Like it wasn't as much like open socially to the friends and to the classes and everything. We were kind of locked down. I'll tell you, especially that first season, it was very anticlimactic, I think, because I had spent 2 years trying to get into Invite with the main team and failing at the qualification point, like on like the last playoff game, like win this, you go to the semifinals of the playoffs and you get into Invite. And we failed at every fucking hurdle. So when we got in, I was so jacked up. But because the time we got into Invite coincided with Michael and I putting this new lineup together, that first season was so fucking easy. Like I would get hyped up for the matches and everything and focused, but I didn't realize it at the time, but when I look back on it now and in later years, we had hit a level to we were just operating at a different level to every other team in North America in terms of practice, in terms of the focus we had on the game. And that doesn't mean we didn't struggle or couldn't be beat, but like games just felt so fucking easy because it felt like we were the 2018 Astralis of that time period, like just nobody was going to fucking touch us. And unfortunately you only had very few LAN events to actually go and try and back that up. But getting to Invite was like a huge accomplishment, very excited. It was awesome to do with my brother as well. We had a little celebration, but we smoked fucking everyone in North America. And it was anticlimactic in the sense that like there were very few teams that could play us close and give us battles and give us those intense games because we were just beating everyone, 13-4, 13-5, 13-3 were the score lines we were putting up. And that just exacerbated the cheating accusations at guys like fRoD, at guys like Trip had a couple of them. We got accused of everything under the sun. A lot of people said that we would never be able to do it on LAN just because we played such a boring style when no one cared about online Counter-Strike. It was all the classic excuses that you recycled in today's Counter-Strike, which is why we always laugh about them when we hear them today.
By the way, since obviously for this roster it was a significant one, let me ask about the other two players then. As you say, Trip was obviously the player who maybe doesn't have a huge name, but he did go on to the success and complexity. And in that team, he was even the in-game leader. In fact, I always thought he, in some ways, was like the protege of Hare as the in-game leader. Because I thought he clearly took certain philosophical ideas and applied, and he had fRoD as well, obviously helps, But as you say, the guy that no one knew actually was the player Slick. He'd been around this like level. I think it was him and Trip were on like low-level Invite teams, I remember. But these weren't famous players. Like this was like a bunch of like misfit players. Who were these guys?
No, well, I know Trip was I forget what team he was on when we heard his name. He was on a team so at the time that all this is happening, Team 3D had never lost to a North American team on LAN. They'd only lost to Europeans. They only lost to NIP, I think, in that CPL final. They just been ruling North America for like 2 years up to this point. Or for a while up to this point. And Trip was on a team that played them very close at a tournament, like ended up losing, but lost like 13-10, 13-11 score lines, kind of in that ballpark. And he played really well individually. And I always thought that Trip was very similar in a style of play to me, where I had more aggression and he had more passive, but we were both like really smart in terms of game sense, really sharp in terms of mechanics, just like riflers. And we were kind of like soldiers and chess pieces for Michael to use. And yeah, he was like kind of this, I don't know if we had a secondary caller back then, but he had those same qualities and he would go on to use those in complexity. But really, really fucking good. on the verge of breaking out in the scene. We grabbed him, like that was kind of like his first like breakout moment, was that close loss to 3D, and we just kind of snatched him at that point because we felt like we had to go for it. And would end up becoming just a really, really solid piece, like really calm, really stable personality, really, really good in the server, really reliable, and just a very smart player. And him and I developed a lot of similar moves, which is why we have a lot of similarities. In fact, I'll never forgive that motherfucker. He's got that famous clip on Train against that Chinese team where he's under the first train.
I think it's against Koreans. I think it was Lunatic High. I think
Korea.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and he like crawls underneath the train leg and wraps around it as he's tracking the footsteps going past him. He learned that move from fucking me.
I love it. Okay.
That motherfucker learned that move from me. Okay. But now he's got the famous clip for it. But we were very similar and always got along really well. Slick was, as you said, the X factor. He was more of a journeyman guy who'd been was hovering in like the qualifying for invite at the main and premier level, getting into a low tier main team, that team blowing up or getting demoted, and him going back into that cycle again. But like I said, like we tried out a couple different people. I can't remember all of them. The one that sticks out the most is, you might remember the name Beers.
Oh, sure. He was actually on E7 or whatever it was. There you go. That was the team, right?
Yeah. E7 Beers. We brought him over, and he was really, really good, really skilled, really talented, but didn't have the same level of wasn't picking up as fast the team style that we wanted to use. So we played with him for a few months, and it was clear that the fragging was there, but something wasn't really chiming with the way we were trying to play a game as a team. Jiving. I don't know why I said chiming. And that was maybe a month before that CPL, we made the call to drop him, who was, probably a better player, to bring in Slick, to where we thought we played a couple practices with him, and it was just much easier on the team level, even if the fragging output wasn't there in the same way, but we thought it felt much better for the team. So that was like a month before CPL, we made that switch. And he stayed on U5 for a little bit longer. I think he stayed longer in the West Coast version that I was on for a while. Or no, he was on it before me. And then I would join up with it. I'm getting all those details mixed up, but those don't matter. But yeah, he would stick around, but he didn't really have any career to speak of. He was kind of like a journeyman player that did very well in the role that we wanted him to play and performed. And I think he went off and became like a prison guard in New York.
Listen, you caught me up at the end there.
I know. I just dropped that one.
Okay, I like that. Okay.
The unlikeliest conclusion.
Okay, what about then when you went to this first CPL, the big one, which is obviously the CPL Winter 2003? I can tell you what's fun about doing some of these interviews is it's not a joke. People, when people tell me that thing where they go, esports historian, anyone could look it up. I always tell them two things. One, you are aware there weren't any of those Wikipedias for like the first 15 years, so you couldn't look it up. And two, I didn't just look it up, I was there. So I actually knew the players who were in the other top teams at the time this is going on, Moses, and I can tell you, you are correct. Guess what? People like Motor, by the way, in a way, he was doing the Jordan thing himself. Oh, he had a beef with everyone in the fucking team, mate. He had a reason why everyone who wasn't in his team was like fraud, cheater, onliner, they shouldn't win because, whatever, they're losers or something. You have some reason to have a bit. And I can tell you, when they came to this LAN, it wasn't even on their radar they could lose to you guys. When they met you in the fucking second round of the upper bracket or whatever, like you say, their whole shit back then was one, we only lose to the best Europeans because we've been the kings of NA, as you said, for 3 years. We go to LANs. Yep. It's why the famous story, if people don't know the reason why De Beers had such a hard career, is because when he was on that 3D the years before and they famously failed that first one, people like Rambo and K-Shot didn't even know they didn't even know you could come 17th, mate. They thought a bad tournament was we only came third, so they were 17th and obviously lost their minds completely. So back there at this point in time, not only in your team are you not big land names, like I say, if you're someone who already to cope decides online competition is all just cheaters and onliners, you're going to think this is a team of misfits, whereas we're almost the fucking, we are the golden boys of anyway. We're born and bred to be the champions. We're supposed to win this. So I can tell you that, mate, that actually shook them to their core when they lost that fucking game to 1 mil. They didn't even think that was possible. And I think that even though, listen, you didn't have a crazy finish at the tournament. If people don't know, the only teams that beat you were Swedish teams. They were top 6 teams, both of them. And this was kind of a very shocking. This is what, as you say, it's probably the first big, massive upset from an NA team.
Yeah, good. Fuck them. I hope they were shook. That was a weird CPL because that was also the first LAN that we played together with that lineup. I remember getting to that CPL and checking in and setting up in the BYOC the day we arrived, late in the night, a 7 or 8 p.m. Not late, but late in the evening. And all 5 of us set up, and we just went and got a scrim from some random team that was there from North America, like one of the teams that had just signed up for the open competition. And we didn't lose, but I think like it was like a 13-9 or something. And like Michael, I remember Michael and I looked at each other and we're like, we're fucked. These guys suck on, like, we looked down, like fRoD had a bad game, Trip had a bad game, Slick had a bad game on LAN. And we're like, oh fuck, we've hit the horror story. Like all these guys fucking blow on LAN compared to what they were online. And then it turns out it was probably just tired from the travel and setup and everything like that, and everything was good the next day. But who do we play? We played some no-name team first and beat them on Dust 2. I think we had to play another team before we eventually got to 3D. I think
you played Rival
before 3D.
You played against Rival on train.
I think we had to beat them in overtime. Maybe I don't recall exactly, but that was a close game. But during that game, I think what had happened was 3D played MIBR, if I remember correctly, and I think didn't they
played
reach MIBR before they played us?
It was GTX, the other Brazilian team.
And okay. I'm getting mixed up. But anyways, yeah, it was a weird one because we thought the players were going to suck. We thought all of a sudden all this work was going to go to waste. And we got into this game against 3D. I have this distinct memory of them losing to a Brazilian team.
The thing is,
it was
after they lost to MIBR. They beat GTX, but they lost to MIBR after. Okay.
So we meet them. We're both 2-0. We got there in the end. We play them on cash. And I mean, man, this was like, this was actually, and this was where I think we'd been building up to the whole, like, this was what all of our like practice and work had been, like this monumental match that we'd had. So for us, in a way, we went into that with like a grand finals level focus because that was like the only goal we'd had for months was get good enough to like beat this fucking team with this IGL that we fucking hate, with this team that hasn't lost any. We want to be the best team in North America. We have to beat them to do it. We want to be the first team to beat them on LAN. We have to beat them here to do it. And yeah, we won in a very intense game. I think we had to win an eco round, which was unheard of in Counter-Strike at the time, like a 5 USP round, which just never fucking occurs. And we won it in some cool ways. I remember distinctly losing a 1v1 clutch to K-Sharp that haunts my mind to this day. I remember distinctly what won us the game was our CT side. We destroyed Moto specifically in the sewers on Mill. He was their sewers player. And I think at the end of the game, there was like an article written up about it. And my brother and I were the two tasked with taking over sewer control. Yeah. So there was an article that mentioned that during this game, we had gone like 7-1 against Moto. Yeah. You probably wrote the article, didn't you? Fucking, yeah. Like we had just went 7-1 against Moto and completely deleted him out of the map. He had a terrible map. I think I won like 2 or 3 specific rounds with like good timely flanks and plays and clutch post plants. My brother and I won like a 2-on-3. So everything went right. And that was fucking huge, but that was huge for so many reasons that I didn't expect because it felt very much like it's a personal goal for us and the team. But as we left the tournament area in that win, there was a crowd of North American fans in 2003 clapping, creating like the tunnel you walk through, like out of the tournament area. Like it was only like 20 people, but everyone had been like waiting for a moment for an underdog to beat 3D. So that was kind of a crazy game for us. And I mean, that's obviously one of my favorite games to think back on and look back on because it was such a huge win for us, but that was everything. But I mean, it was fun. It was like, man, halftime during that game. I remember we had like, there was like a 1-minute halftime or something, like a freeze time. And I remember Michael turned to us, turned down the line, and he just shouts out in this tournament area, and he goes, "These guys fucking suck. We know they fucking suck. They can't fucking, like, they got fucking nothing on it," and shouts this in the tournament area at the CPL, which like just doesn't really occur all that much. And it was fucking Angel came over, Angel Munoz, who's like the CEO, the president of CPL, and it was the first time they'd had like bigger cameras in the tournament area for all the sponsors, and he was like pulled his headphones. Obviously, we can't have you shouting that kind of stuff in the tournament area. It's like the NVIDIA won't like it, Intel won't like it. Sure. But he was like doing that kind of shit to get everyone fucking hyped up, and that was such a big win for us. It was crazy. But you know, it's always funny because those things have such like weird knock-on effects. Like this even applies to just like a couple weeks ago, or like a month ago at Cologne when Mouse beats Vitality in the semifinal for the first time on their 8th attempt. And that was the experience I drew on when I did the death segment, because after we won that game against 3D, that was the win. So for me mentally, I remember feeling very much for the rest of that tournament like we'd already won the event. Like for us, the victory was there. I'd won the trophy. Everything that happened after that was like, what the fuck ever. Like, it doesn't matter. Like that was where I felt a lot of discipline slip because I had accomplished the goal that we had set for ourselves. Unfortunately, it happened in round 2 of like a 7-round event.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I think that feeling was throughout the team. And that was the analysis I used when I went up to, I was like, Mal's just beat this team that they've been trying all year to beat. This is their 8th attempt and they finally do it. I know that feeling of accomplishing this goal that you've set for yourself. And I know the trap of feeling like you've already accomplished your goal when there's more to play for at this event. So it's kind of funny how so much of analysis 20 years later can draw from those kind of experiences because the feelings and the emotions don't change from player to player, right? You know that exact pitfall. Unless you've been through it, you know exactly what they're about to walk into.
Plus, as you say, the other significant thing here was, even though you guys finished like 7th or something like that, that actually was the highest of any NA team at the time. It's funny because now it'll make more sense because in the modern day it's like this now, where Europeans dominate the game. But back then, basically, 3D were the hopes. They were the ones you hope go top 4, maybe. But then actually, aside from that, the famous valuation for an NA team is if you're not 3D, you're just trying to make top 8. If you make top 8, you've won, basically.
And also, there's that element to it, and being top, the number 1 NA team, that was something that we were very much aware of after we beat them. It was the first thing someone said to us, because I think the Canadian team with Stevenson had just gotten knocked out as well on the other side of the bracket. But yeah, that was that. I mean, 7th never looks good, and it doesn't look good in retrospect. But I have no way of telling people today that how big of an accomplishment that was at the time. But I mean, the sad thing is, off of that win and off of that energy dump and off of that dropped focus due to accomplishing that goal, that next game is one we like. I mean, this is funny too, because you'll just see how nothing changes from players over the years. We should have fucking won the next game too. Like, we just fucking bottled the next game. Lack of discipline, all the strengths that we built up in NA of like being the team that was hyper focused, hyper disciplined, hyper strategic. It all kind of slipped away off that win from 3D. So our biggest success ended up being our undoing. But it was an MR12 game against Team 64 Sweden, who would then become eyeballers, who would win the next CPL. They had Quick, they had Vesselin, they had all these guys.
Oh, wait, that was Adrenaline. 64 was the one.
Adrenaline, yeah.
Adrenaline was the upper one.
Yeah.
But it was top team.
Yeah, Team 92 was the team that we researched looking into it going. That was the team we modeled ourselves after. My apologies.
Right.
But we played them in MR12. We won the pistol round. We won the first gun round on both halves. Like, that's a win in like 90% of MR12, especially at the time. But this is where I learned how the economy was such an important part of the game, is because the way they beat us was by manipulating the economy, and no NA teams had caught on to it this much.
I think this was a year before the Shagwa article that changed it all. So as far as I know, I think this might even have been the event that spurred him through. But it hadn't been written yet at this point, I'm pretty certain.
Yes. No, the article that changed the money system that Shagwa wrote hadn't been written, would be written after this CPL.
Right.
Which is where we would beat them. We beat them in the pistol round, beat them in the second, third round, fourth round, first gun round would come along. We'd beat them, but they would save for 1 or 2 players would save their weapons, and we didn't hunt because we're like, we're up 5-on-2, we don't need to hunt. Like, hunting wasn't really a kind of a concept back then yet, in the same way that it is now.
And if you've never seen someone do this save, you think, well, they're just losing the rounds. We're winning. This is awesome.
Yeah, like, what the fuck? But
basically,
keep your fucking Galil.
If people don't know, there was a weird bug, because obviously it wasn't designed this way, that if the team saved, you basically CT's got less money.
The CTs don't get any money.
Oh, there you go. Right.
You don't get any money at all when they save. So like, we'd win like round 2, round 3 with these like MP5s, and then they'd save a Glock and they'd get bonus money. We'd get no money. They'd go into this 4th round. They'd save with their 2 players. We'd get no money. So we'd go into the next gun round with no money built up, with MP9s, maybe a FAMAS, and they'd have AK-47s. Right. And they beat us, and then we'd have to go through that economic thing again where the reset was so harsh. We'd have to sit out 2 rounds with USPs and just lose those. So those early advantages disappeared, but we weren't aware. We knew the economy was like that. The knowledge was there, but how to manipulate it to win a game of Counter-Strike wasn't really there, and wasn't fleshed out, and wasn't widespread. So that was kind of a trick or an aspect of the game that the European guys brought over that just decimated us and schooled us. But I still have like nightmare moments from that game of like 3 moves I should have done or could have done, who intuition was telling me to do, and I chose not to, and ended up losing because of it. And I still have 2 nightmare rounds that my brain will go to from that match. So we lost that one, and I think it was single elimination. So you were just out at that point.
You had the low bracket to play the Team 64.
Oh, that's right. Fuck me. Dude,
in the lower bracket, you beat G3X or Gallus' team.
That's right.
And then you played the team 64.
And Koga's team.
Yeah.
And was Gallus on that team?
I think he was, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Fuck Gallus.
Let me double check.
Yes, we got him. Yeah. But I know we beat Kogu. We didn't know who fucking Kogu was at the time. We thought he was just some fucking chump opera would go on to become one of the best ones. We beat them on Aztec, and honestly, that match for us was a joke. I think I knifed Kogu in that match. We were running around like playing like 60%, like not to be a dick or an ego about it, but like I think after the 3D win, after that next loss,
Kogu and Gaules were on the team. This is before Kogu was on MIBR. Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck that guy. But yeah, I didn't know that.
By the way, that's a pretty good story. They knifed Kogu in an official match. It's pretty fucking good.
Yeah. And we were literally just messing. We didn't know who they were because this I think was their kind of breakout event too. Because I think they would go on, or maybe it was I'm mixed up now. One of the Brazilian teams would go on to beat 3D, which is the first time I'd ever seen a Brazilian fan base in action.
It was MIBR, but you're right.
Confused.
At the time, you're right. At the time, even though Brazilians used to go to these lands, the joke back then was it was a bit like the teams from Chile and stuff. They were also lands. If a team like that went in the bracket, everyone just looked past them and assumed this is when they first actually showed they were good. Yeah.
They smoked 3D and they got on all the forums like the stereotypical ja over and over from Brazilian fans just spammed. But yeah, and then we beat 3D.
Yeah, by the way, any of you haters out there now, like Brazilian fans, you know nothing. Don't speak to us of it. We were there. Gandalf.
It was for
exactly.
I think Team 9 Sui. I think we had an intimidation factor because, as I mentioned, that was the team that we looked into and we researched and we molded our game after. So it was kind of like the students facing the master.
Right.
They smoked us on Cobble. I think they won the pistol in the first gun round and got such a good lead on T-side Cobble that in Counter-Strike that days in MR12, like if a team got 5 rounds on you on Cobble, like it was over. Cobble was like a 11-2 half is like a okay half for the CT side. So they just smoked us. And then we went and played 4 Kings on CPL Fire, which was one of the custom maps that only took places in CPL and really were only played in North America. And understandably, those guys were so checked out because they'd never played the map before.
Sure.
I think one of their players went to sleep in the BYOC or in the tournament area during the match. Because if nobody knows, if you get knocked to the lower bracket at the CPL, your last day was potentially like 8 games of nonstop. It was you don't get up. You just play until you lose in the lower bracket. So I think for them at the end of the run that they'd been on, they were so exhausted playing a map they'd never played before. We made them look silly. We kind of embarrassed them on the map. They didn't know what was going on, and we ended up getting 7th place and a cool $7,000, which we actually got. We were one of the few to actually get it.
1, good. 2, that even though obviously that is nothing now. At the time though, I bet it felt baller even to get 7K though. It's fucking money.
Sick. Yeah, it's fucking sweet. And I mean, it's one of those things too, where it's also like ammunition against your parents when you go home because it's like an I told you so, and it's a significant time investment. Like we always talk about the time investment that players have now, which is significant. And it's obviously a very different style with the way the scene is set up at this point. But I mean, back then it was me going to school at 7:15 in the morning, being at school until 2:30, leaving school, going to soccer practice for 2.5 hours, doing soccer practice, coming home, having dinner, and then getting on the PC and practicing for 2-3 hours, and then trying to find a way to sneak out of your bedroom and stay awake for another 2 to 3 hours to play in the pugs until 2 in the morning, and then repeat. And so, I mean, we don't have the same opportunities, but you're still investing every moment of your free time that you possibly can into Counter-Strike, into thinking about Counter-Strike, into playing Counter-Strike. So the investment was all still there, just for different stakes and different tools at our usage.
Now, you never catch me dolo online because I'm rolling deep and we dem boys. Who am I talking about? The Skrilluminati. So this video and the content on my channel is kindly supported by Matt Pugnaccio Racula, Toucan, Jensen Gore, Nikki, Jason, you know who my second in command is, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Would you like to ask me a question in an AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where you get to set the topic? Maybe you want to see who upcoming guests are in my interviews and on my talk shows. Well, all of these perks and more are available to you if you put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today. How? Via the Patreon link in the description box below. You dig?